Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Freshly Awoken podcast. What are we at? I always forget what number we're at. This
Number
every time.
13.
Number 13. The topic is going to be mental health. I'll let Fresh get a bit more in depth into that in a minute. But before we do, we need to intro our guests. The most important thing. So we've got Luke. Sorry, BlackFireRebel. You haven't been on before, have you?
No.
I don't think I have. No.
No, this is your first time on.
I don't
Man,
think
I
so.
can't believe that we've done so many podcasts. We haven't been able to find a time.
He's always
until now,
working.
but,
I ask him like all the time.
I usually work on Sundays. Yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Luke, also known as BlackFireRebel. I'm a streamer on Twitch, and I'm doing YouTube as well now. So I guess that's my two things. I do like strategy games and stuff, and that's me more or less.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
22. I live in England.
Nice. Do you stream much?
I stream. I try and stream 3 days a week, but I end up streaming like 5 days a week, and I'm trying to stream less, which is a weird thing to want to say, but
Yeah.
I need to stream less.
Nice.
Yeah.
And our other guest, what are we calling you? Sorry, Prozac. Prozac. Oh my God, is that a joke?
Yeah, it's topical.
He just got it, woke. It's been sitting there the whole
didn't even
time.
think about
Oh my
it either.
Lord. I didn't even think about it.
Oh my Lord.
It's
my
an
gosh, both of
antidepressant
you.
joke.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's funny. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hey, I'm Zach. I've known Fresh and Woke for a long time. I work in industry with young people, and a lot of that work is related to mental health. So they were kind enough to invite me onto the show.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it
right.
was, I don't know why, but when I thought about mental health, I was like, you were probably one of the first people that I thought of in my own life, just because I know that working with young people comes with a lot of mental health territory. So thank you for coming on. And obviously we've got Fresh Plays Live.
Yep. How's it going, guys? I am Fresh Plays Live. You're on my channel, obviously, but I stream on YouTube now too on Monday. So follow, or what is it called? Subscribe to the YouTube Fresh Plays
YouTube
Live.
Mondays. Very nice.
YouTube Mondays. That's it. And how you doing, Woke?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Mr. Woke TV. I on Twitch, and I just hang about. That's pretty much it. I'm playing Dark Souls at the moment, and Fortnite, which I'm like obviously a god at. And I recently shaved a pretty hefty beard into this quite sleek, good-looking thing on my face, this handlebar mustache. And I know all of you guys are like, please, you're so
Super
attractive
jealous.
now.
Yeah.
I need to be really careful
Mm.
around you. But yeah, I also run this podcast with Fresh, so
Mhm.
that's me.
We
That's
run
me.
this
And
town.
I hope you guys like it. This is actually the first time I didn't think about it, but this is the first time I've been on stream with this filthy nose. So.
But hey, on to the favorite segment, Woke.
Ooh,
The
favorite
beer
segment.
review. Not
Mate,
bad, maybe. I don't know.
That was
Is that
great.
right? All right, good. Well done.
So it turns out what we need to do to get that right is just not include our guests.
Yeah, done.
Yeah, nice. So I'll start with mine. So I was at the shop, and look, I don't know if a lot of you guys know my real name, but this beer has reference to my real name in the label, just in case you guys want to try to like figure it out, sleuth it out. But it's a premium lager called Hollandia. Hollandia Premium Lager. And that's what I'm going to be drinking. To be fair, I'm not expecting a lot. I jumped on it because the name, but it was $35 for a carton, so I'm not really expecting much. Who else has a beer?
I've got a Four Pines, which is a really good, actually a really nice company. I like their beers, and I've got their drought today, and it's a pint-sized drought, so looking forward to it. Should be good.
Oh, nice. It's looking good.
I believe Rebel's got some sitting on his radiator there.
I did. I went out and bought myself a nice smoked porter. It's Viven. Of course, where I am right now, it's midday, but it's a Sunday, so you know. Yeah, it's a Belgian smoked porter. And I have no idea what it's gonna be like.
Hey.
Yeah.
Nice. And Zach, you didn't have a beer, right?
No, but I have since. I've got a Brookvale Union iced tea.
Oh,
Ooh,
lovely.
Very nice.
Very
a bit
nice.
controversial, but it's
bit
good.
controversial.
Nice. All right. Sweet. All right. Crack them, boys.
Crack them beers, boys. All right, so to get into the topic, I thought we would come up with it. We've got the pretty broad question. So, gentlemen, what is your experience with mental health? Have you had much experience? What would you say? I know it's a broad question, but what is your experience with mental health?
Well, I guess I'll start. I have definitely I've had um, I feel like it's a weird thing because growing up when I was younger, mental health was so far from my mind. I it never really crossed my mind until I was like a proper adult, I think. And I don't know if that's just like a product of our times where it was like it wasn't really talked about or it wasn't around back when I was like a kid. Not that it wasn't around, but like that it wasn't part of like the mainstream culture or talked about much. But then once I became an adult, it was sort of coming into its own and people were becoming a bit more aware of it. And so it I became more aware of it because of that. But in my adult life, I've known so many people that struggle with mental health issues. I've worked at a school for at-risk children where like every single one of the kids at that school had some like serious problems that they were dealing with. Um, I have had some mental health issues myself over the years, and I've also dated a couple of people that have struggled from like anxiety and stuff like that, and had to see how that kind of plays out and flesh that out in my relationships, which has been super interesting.
Radio.
Is a nice way to put it, but yeah, that's kind of my experience with it. What about you guys?
Rebel Zach.
Yeah, I'm happy to go.
Okay.
So yeah, I've struggled a lot with my mental health. Like when I was a kid, like I was one of the at-risk kids when I was younger, and I still struggle with stuff from time to time. I've also dated people who've had anxiety. I struggled a lot with self-harm when I was younger, and I have seasonal affective disorder as well. So in the winter months, and especially because I work nights too, like I have to take supplements and get like a sunlight lamp and all that kind of stuff. And but yeah, I sort of got my history in sort of dealing with it myself and trying to be open with people and talk about it, which is kind of what I've struggled with from my perspective. So I'm kind of trying to bring that perspective from my end.
Nice. What
Yeah.
was that? Sorry, I've not heard a lot about seasonal. What was
Seasonal
seasonal?
affective disorder. The
Yeah.
abbreviation is SAD, even though I think affective starts with an E, but I'm
The
dyslexic.
abbreviation is
so
SAD.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Sad.
it's basically
I said.
is basically when you don't get enough sunlight. It obviously, I guess you guys don't really have to deal with that much in Australia because you get a lot of sunlight.
Yeah, no.
Oh, no.
But
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's basically just a lack of natural light can really affect your mental health, and
Okay.
I suffer with it quite a lot. And obviously, yeah, I work nights and stuff, so that doesn't help it either. And just
Oh, yeah,
basically during the
100%.
winter months, it's summer for you guys right now, but it's winter for me. So
Yeah.
it's like the height of the big sad.
Yeah, right. So is that like a vitamin D kind of thing? Like it's like the not
Yeah,
getting
kind of.
like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
nutrients or whatever we get from like daylight
yeah,
affects
yeah.
like
More or less. Yeah,
people have like
it's
Yeah.
disorders
it like
from that.
creates a chemical imbalance.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you
And so,
invested in any of
Mhm.
those light bulbs, Rebel?
I have a lamp that I keep by my bed, which an ex-girlfriend bought for me, and I was like, at the time, I was like, it's just a stupid lamp. It's not gonna do anything. It's like, well, why do I need a stupid lamp for? And like during the winter months, I wake up, I open my phone, I turn my little lamp on, and then I have to sit in bed just like in front of this lamp for like a good 5-10 minutes before I can actually like get up.
Oh,
And
wow.
it does genuinely really help.
The lamp helps.
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah,
And
which is weird because it's a lamp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
I've definitely found that it's like sometimes not the solutions, because I don't think there's like one be all and end all solution to the problems, or like to people's problems, but sometimes the things that can help are like like they feel stupidly simple.
Mm.
Like so quite a lot of the reason that I've struggled with my mental health is because of my sleeping habits, which are borderline non-existent. I do not have sleeping habits, and how that lack of sleep then has like knock-on effects to like how I interact with my day, how I interact with people, my energy levels, and all that kind of stuff. And how something so simple as potentially just getting better sleep can like pull you out of a rut, or turning on a lamp for a few hours a day can potentially pull you out of a rut. You know, it's weird how
Yeah.
like sometimes it can just be something so simple. Um, Zach, what about you? Have you said before that you work with kids, obviously, and that comes with the mental health issues come with the territory kind of thing when it comes to kids.
Yeah, absolutely. It's for young people. It's one of the top three issues, research-wise, that they're concerned about and they're wanting more information on. And that's kind of the last 10 years in a nutshell. Really, we're just really starting to understand and want to understand mental health.
Mm,
In terms of me, my career has definitely been shaped by my personal experience with mental health as well. Been right across the spectrum in terms of feeling relatively happy with life to feeling absolutely destroyed by it, and
mm,
but yeah, feeling in a good space for me anyway has always been quite temporary, and it's kind of about managing things rather than expecting some sort of cure or anything like
yeah,
that.
no, 100%.
Which is something I'm sure we can go a bit more into detail today.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I've had my run of anxiety and depression, and I don't think those things are going away anytime soon. But I'm in a very good spot at the moment. Um,
nice.
so much so where I think I can, like, I enjoy, and I'm pretty active in promoting and supporting people with their own mental health journeys, that sort of thing.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's it was interesting that you said the whole like the last 10 years is where it's really come into its own. And I kind of touched on that as well, where it's like, man, I don't really remember when I was a kid. So I'm almost 30. I turned 30 in like a month, guys, just for those of you who
Old,
don't know.
old
Month. Wait, 2 months.
What?
Oh my god, so I'll get him out. What a boomer.
boomer.
But yeah, sorry. So but when I was a kid, like it was not brought up at all. It was never discussed. I don't think I know anyone that mentioned it or any learning anything about like mental health issues when I was growing up. Did you guys have similar experiences?
There was definitely a lot more of a stigma around it, and if people like, if you knew someone was getting at least in my social circles, if someone was getting counselling or something, it was like, oh, he's probably a little bit crazy or something like that, which is
Yeah.
really terrible.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think since we've kind of been able to identify and diagnose a bit better, I think a lot of the things that we were experiencing got passed off as other things. So I can, like,
Mm,
most of us who had glandular fever when we were in year 11 and 12,
Mm.
probably not from kissing. It was probably actually like symptoms of anxiety and depression. But our parents
Yeah.
were telling us that it was, oh,
glandular
it's got to be, my
kissing.
child isn't depressed. They've got to have glandular fever. That's more
Yeah.
likely.
Yeah. Why do we reckon that is that why do we think that there has been a big shift in awareness around mental health? Is it because we're kind of like we're realizing that this is something that we can actually help with and address, or like is it like a social acceptance thing where we're finally kind of coming to terms with the fact that these people aren't like crazy, they just need a little bit of extra help? Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a social, like a culture change.
mm,
Science is also really good for figuring out things, funnily enough. And like after, as more and more like studies come out and science come out about these things not being, um, about them being very biological and that kind of thing, a lot of the stigma falls away.
interesting.
Yeah, and we've definitely got it wrong a lot up until now as well.
Mm,
I think cognitive behavioral therapy, for anyone that's done or experienced counseling or had counseling, a lot of the counselors will be using cognitive behavioral therapy.
mm,
Hmm.
And for those who don't know, that's kind of like a combination of different therapies that they've kind of combined, and it started to stick and be quite effective.
mm,
And I think because psychology is kind of being recognized as a legitimate science,
mm.
more so in the last 15 years as well. There's definitely more opportunity to get help. And then there's more opportunity to monetize that help as well. But maybe that's a conversation for another time.
That's
Yeah.
cool. That's cool.
Well, I mean, I think that's almost any industry, like when you see industries boom, like there has to be it's a bit sad, but there's almost like there has to be a monetary side of it. Otherwise there's no incentive for people to pick it up. Like if there weren't careers in like psychology and stuff to get into, then like why would people study it? You know, or like
Yeah.
not there would still be people that study it and that get into it completely altruistically. Um,
Yeah.
that's a hard one because I would hate to say that anyone getting into fields is not getting into them for altruistic reasons and wanting to genuinely care and want to help people, but it's obviously incentivized by money, right?
Yeah,
Partially, yeah.
I think the incentive for most people is to help, but you wouldn't be able to help as much as you want to, and you wouldn't be able to study it as much if you
Cool.
knew that
That's a
you
way
wouldn't be
better
able
way
to
to put it.
fund yourself through it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
I want to do this good thing, and I can dedicate my whole life to it because I'm going to be able to pay my bills with it as well.
Yeah, true.
I think
Yeah,
that's
no,
sort of
I can actually live a
Yeah.
life without having. I can care for people without having to sacrifice my life for it. You know.
Imagine if Twitch
Yeah.
streaming was like that. JK. Yeah, and I guess like a lot of oh geez, I completely forgot what I was gonna say now. My joke was too funny. Sorry, move on.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up Twitch and stuff because obviously there's I've personally found that there's a lot of the people on the Twitch platform, whether it's viewers or streamers, struggle with some form of mental illness in one shape or another. Is that something that do you think online interactions generally attract those kind of people that are struggling, or is it that being online and the way that we interact online helps to cause us to spiral out of control or go down those paths that are a little bit darker?
I think we talked
I'm not
before.
sure about a lot of that.
Yeah, fair. What
We're
was
all
that,
too
Zach?
polite to speak.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes from connectivity. We have more of an opportunity to meet different people from different walks of life, and I think, and this is something that I know we wanted to talk about today as well, is that I don't think any of us get a good run when it comes to mental health. It'll just be like how severe it is for us, and I think that when we talk to people who might be comfortable with sharing, um, it's inevitable that we think about our own lives. And I think because the conversation's becoming more appropriate and more positive and more accepted, I think we're definitely introspecting a bit more and thinking, oh, maybe I'm experiencing some level of anxiety or depression. And yeah, I don't think that's a bad thing, but I also think you need to be careful and take advice from the right places and make sure that you're protecting yourself as well.
I think we talked before, Woke, about how like social. We were talking about social skills and how social stuff is just like really, really complicated. It's no set way of thinking about it, and so much is like non-verbal and inferred that it's very difficult for people. And we understand why people have social problems, and then if they're on the internet because they've got some social problems, and then it's a lot easier to kind of negate that out behind a keyboard. So if you're doing that constantly and not really getting any face-to-face interaction, that can definitely damage your mental health.
No, yeah, 100%. I think it's like, for me, I think it's like it's a two-way street as well. Like it's kind of like being online. It definitely has the benefits for people that are struggling with social issues and or like struggling with socializing and maybe struggling with a little bit of mental health. It has benefits, but then it can also be detrimental as well. It just depends on how you manage it and how you use the platforms, and being aware of your limitations, I guess, is a big one. Yeah. I I definitely found that being it, it's this is a hard one because it's kind of like, okay, I've had my struggles with a bit of anxiety here and there, nothing like ridiculously insane, or like insane something. Wait, should I not be using that word? But
I don't think insane's classified as an ableist like slur. I think. Oh, I mean, we do categorize people. That's an interesting one. I don't think so.
I don't know.
I think it's fine.
Yeah, but no pun intended. And not like a really heavy dose. I don't know how to describe it, but I've definitely had my problems with that. But I found that being around a lot of people that were having the same kind of issues, as much as it was great because it kind of like made me think, oh, okay, well, maybe what I'm experiencing is actually some level of anxiety. I also found that knowing that it was anxiety didn't necessarily help me deal with it. Does that make sense? Like
As in,
it
like,
almost
the diagnosis
initially,
didn't necessarily help
yeah,
you.
like the self diagnosis
Oh, okay.
initially, when I go, oh, well, maybe I am struggling with anxiety, before I um sought help for it,
Mm,
it was not a positive thing, And the positive side comes from when you actually act on the fact that you think you might be having mental health issues, or need some help and whatever. And that's where I saw positive, like positive benefits, not
mm,
from just having the awareness raised and being like, oh, well, maybe I am struggling here. And I found that actually was like quite detrimental to me, because then I
mm,
started like getting up in my own head with it and being like, oh my goodness, like I'm like I have this problem that I need to deal with, or like that I need to seek help for. And then that kind of helped feed into the anxiety. And it was kind of, yeah, it was like a weird one.
mm. I think a good litmus test is when you if you parallel it to an actual illness, like a physical illness, and you go, so if you think about it, like if you were quite sick and you just thought, okay, I'm sick, it's not necessarily going to help you get better, but just recognizing that you are sick. But if you're able to actually get the help that you need from a doctor for a physical illness, that's going to be what helps. And if you get for a mental illness, if you get the help that you can get from a psych, I would say would be the best one. Then you're able to.
So do we
Yeah.
definitely think that it's better, we're in a better place today, where we say we've raised awareness of people could potentially go get help, rather than being like back in the old days where it was like, oh, toughen up, and like just try to
Yeah.
get through your life? Is it better, or is it worse?
I think it's better, but the devil's advocate argument is that people are gonna, because there's more awareness, people are gonna self-diagnose when it's not necessarily accurate to
Mhm.
what they're dealing with, and they're gonna claim, to have these things for like attention reasons or whatever. But I think the small amount of people that could potentially do that, if anyone, I'm not trying to say that anyone does because I don't really know. Um, I think even if like a small percentage of people do that, I think it's still worth having the knowledge we have now. Like that's such just like a small portion that getting the help for the people that really need it is worth a little bit of people, maybe just acting up around it. So I think overall it's probably better.
Yeah. And you definitely see a lot of that online, is people, I think, that are doing it for attention. And I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's a healthy contribution to the discussion.
And I think almost that is a mental health issue in its own way, right? If you're claiming to do something like that for attention, I think maybe not what you're claiming to have, but there is something else going on there that you need to address.
Yeah.
Most
Mm.
likely.
I've definitely had people like come into my stream before and be like, oh my God, I'm going to kill myself, kind of thing. Have you guys ever
Yeah.
experienced that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just out of curiosity, what's your like take? How do you guys deal with it
So
when it did happen?
one thing definitely that I remember is that first of all, I'm not a trained in some ways, like there's not really much I'm going to be able to do. If that person was very serious about like having suicidal thoughts, then there's nothing I'm going to be able to do from behind my keyboard a world away to help them out, really. So talking about it and entertaining it is not really helpful, because then it kind of just gets everyone in that mindset, and is not really a good way to deal with it. So I've got a command that's !help. If anyone, you can type that at any time in the chat, and it gives them the number for Lifeline in Australia and also America, because that's where that hits like 97% of my viewers.
Nice.
And then I'm like, cool, like if you're really struggling, then you can talk to me in Discord. I don't really love opening that up as an option, but I have before.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I used to do that as an option as well, but I don't really think that I'm a great person to talk to when it comes to that kind of thing. And obviously, I'm not a professional. So what I'll generally do if someone comes into my chat, be like, "Hey, I recommend you, go seek actual professional help. We don't really talk about that, that kind of level of stuff here on like a personal level. But if you want to stay around, hang out, have a good time, try and take your mind off, have a laugh, you're welcome to stay and be in chat, but if you're going to keep talking about it, like, I'm going to time you out. I'm sorry. I know that's not helpful to what you're going through right now, but like, I won't be able to give you any help. The people in chat won't be able to give you any of the help that you actually need. So just try and seek out professional help, but which feels bad to do, right? It's like, don't talk about it, shut up. But it's like, I want you to be able to talk about it, and you should be able to, but you need to do it to the right people.
Yeah,
and
can
you know,
help.
this isn't the space for it.
At an appropriate time.
It feels bad, but then like I parallel it with the physical help. Like if you broke your finger and like went to like your friend and was like, dude, I've like got a broken finger, can you help me? They'd be like, you need to go to like a professional to like get this reset or whatever. So
they wouldn't try to set a cast for your fingers.
We don't know how to do that. We're not in streamers aren't.
I think it is all about that what in industry we'd call it like effective referral, just being, you don't have to be very good at understanding mental health, but just being very good at being able to direct people to the right places. So like a lifeline, whether it's a lifeline referral, if like you feel like a life's in danger, that sort of thing, that's really helpful. And it might not, the person might not feel like it's helpful, but that's really all you can do in your capacity. It's not really your responsibility, and it's they shouldn't be thinking that it is either. I always one thing that we always talk about in youth work as well is like if you want to whinge, and we use the whinge to like mean anything that's like kind of that informal where you're like, it's a real one-sided conversation, or you're just kind of venting or whatever else, like do that with your friends, because that's what your friends are there for. Anyone outside of that should be really intentional about directing you to either your friends or to someone who's a professional, because it's not really, you got to be intentional with your time.
Interesting. Wait, so is that, sorry, just so it's like if you sorry, I didn't quite understand that. So like you say that if they want to like, if they're talking to someone outside of just their friends, then it's like they need to be like understanding that they're like asking for help, like professional help kind of thing. Is that what you mean?
So in terms of like what Rebel was saying about his stream, like unless they have the intention of wanting to get help, like if they're asking Rebel, can you please like give me some help with this, and then Rebel was able to give them some information, really that's not an appropriate conversation if it's just them kind of saying things and like creating a forum of communication that's not really necessary or helpful. If they want that kind of communication where they're wanting to like maybe just vent something and get it off their chest, maybe it's best to do that amongst friends. But if you're really wanting help, then you're ready with that help available to them. I think that's
that's a really good way to look at it. And pretty much like it's one of those things where it's like I don't really talk about it unless it's with people that I'm seeking help from, or with like friends, you know, like it's not really something that I just like spout off about and like talk to every Tom, Dick and Harry that walks past. You know, I'm not walking down the street and meet someone for the first time and go like, oh my God, like I've really struggled with like anxiety, you know, and like, but online there's that disconnect from that, where you just feel like, I don't know, like you can say whatever you want, you know, it's kind of weird. I mean, we've covered online interactions. I feel like it's kind of relevant to everything, but I really wanted to touch on, Zach, one of your thoughts here that was about the Netflix show 13 Reasons Why. I know it was a while ago now and it's really like a trending topic anymore, but I remember at the time there was like huge controversy around that show. Did everybody here, did anyone here not watch it?
You haven't watched it, Rebel? Oh
so
my gosh, no.
Is that from it didn't interest you, or you didn't want to, you heard about what was going on in there and you didn't want to experience that at all? Or
like it wasn't so much that I was like, oh, I don't want to like go through all of that, but it was more like it definitely interested me, but I think when it first came out I wasn't in a great headspace myself, so I was like, I'll probably just give this one a miss. And then as things do, you kind of just forget about it.
Yeah, fair enough. Zach, did you watch it?
Yeah, we actually I had to watch it for work
All
because
right.
here in Perth, for young people, the mental health service is called Headspace.
Mm.
Mm,
They had it was like something like 33% increase in intake from after 13 Reasons Why
mm,
dropped. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and
That's crazy.
for them, that's that it's good because obviously they're getting help.
yeah.
Mm.
But the other thing is it problematic? Is it actually creating issues?
Mm,
Um,
Yeah.
and should Netflix be accountable for that kind of fallout as well?
mm,
I think there's something to be said for using like I'm not 100% sure if like entertainment is the right way to go about raising awareness.
mm,
I think there's definitely something to be said for that. Like it's all very well like the whole the pro take on it is to be saying like, oh, it's really good that it's raising awareness, and how else are we going to get the message to these kids? But I think there's like so many other ways that this message is getting around that it's not necessarily necessary for it to be done through entertainment and something that's like
Mm,
supposed to be
yeah.
there to like make money and just get views basically.
Definitely.
yeah.
And it definitely portrayed suicide in a light that you don't really want to have it portrayed. And that was the main criticism of it, was that I mean, maybe a bit of a spoiler, but I don't feel like it is. But the chick's basically still hanging around. Obviously, the actor's still acting out everything, so it really feels like she has a living presence, even though it's all set after she's died. So
Yeah.
that was the main criticism was, kids don't understand once you're dead. Like, you don't hang around and do all these things to people
Mm.
who bothered you in your life, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, Zach, you said that there was like an increase in people seeking help. That was right. Do you know anything about, I guess, the less pretty side of it, like suicide and stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And Headspace deal a lot with when there has been a suicide in a school, they'll come in and do what's called a postvention workshop, which so obviously it couldn't have been prevented, but they then operate to kind of make sure that people understand that and to not have a repeat, so that people are kind of aware and know what to do. Um, but yeah, it's a strange one, especially for a program like that where they and I know it was like a book or something, was it, to begin with? I can't
13
Could
Reasons
remember.
be,
Why?
probably, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
think it was.
they had that choice to kind of show like a realistic depiction of certain situations.
Mm,
Mm.
And then I think their response to that was a little short, like documentary on the side that like Selena Gomez is like, yeah, we're raising awareness, and it's like, oh, but yeah, like, and
Yeah.
then I think they repeated it in season 2, which we watched as well. And there's a really graphic scene in there as well, and
Mm.
it's like, are you, is this actually doing what you're wanting it to do, or is
Yeah.
it just really entertaining television because we are interested and we are kind of wanting that explicit content as well?
What's your take on it? Just out of curiosity, do you
Um,
appreciate the awareness, or do you think that it's potentially problematic?
no, like I'm sure the narrative doesn't work as well if you did do it this way, and
Mm.
I'm aware of that. But I think they needed to approach it and really hit home that like the actions of this person weren't the responsibility of anyone else; that it was their
Hmm.
choice. A lot of those conversations were wrapped up in like one sentence by one character.
Yeah.
They didn't really take any accountability for the fallout.
mm,
Maybe if they had have, if Netflix could have set up something in terms of, didn't have to be in the show, but make more of an effort to actually take responsibility.
Mm.
Um, but I don't think it's very helpful to look at it in that way. Maybe it is for some, and I know in terms of like our list of things we wanted to talk about, there is ways that we can kind of go about kind of feeling things to make sure that we're not feeling worse things, and the whole like use of catharsis. So a lot of us have used music, or like
mm,
maybe we've punch danced our rage out, or different things like that. Like there are ways to deal with it, but I don't think that program was. I don't think that was a tool for like the majority of people. I think it may have been helpful for a few people and probably quite devastating for quite a lot of other people.
Yeah, yeah, that was
Mm.
kind of my take on it as well. It's like, I don't know, at the time when it came out, it was definitely it was very talked about, and I was like, well, I've got to watch it. And I was watching it. To be honest, I didn't really enjoy the show, but I was like, man, everybody's talking about it. I'm just going to watch through it. And I was in a really good mental place at the time, and even uh, like even me at the time, like when I watched the scene at the end, uh, I was it was brutal. Like I
Yeah.
felt it. I was like,
Yeah,
whoa,
that was
I
actually pretty
don't
hectic.
know. I thought I would be okay, but I don't know.
Mm,
I feel like I shouldn't have watched that. You know, I don't think that they should have shown it. And
mm,
if I felt like that, imagine someone that was like that was struggling with this kind of thing, and that kind of was what really hit it home for me. That I was like
mm.
I can't recommend this show to anybody.
Yeah. It's
Mm.
another one like the Joker where very, very hard to recommend to people.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. I like watching. Has everyone seen the Joker?
No.
That's a no from.
All from the
Rebel, you
audience.
need to get out, bro.
I've just been playing video games, man.
I'm
He's
out
a
here on the
real
grind,
gamer. He's a real
streaming.
gamer on the
Yeah.
grind.
The Joker. Did they release a video game for that? But yeah, that was the thing where I watched it and it was like, did I enjoy that? Like, it's a weird one for me. I was like, I wasn't really sure if I like enjoyed it, even though I could appreciate that it was like a fairly well made movie. I got to the end and I was kind of like, yeah, not
Mm.
sure if I could recommend that to people. Who would I recommend it to without feeling like I was sending them into something that's like kind of triggering a little bit?
The funny thing was, it wasn't like
Yeah.
ridiculously violent or anything as well. It was just
No.
like, I don't know, like real, and like a
Mhm.
couple of scenes were just really hit home. So yeah, it was I wouldn't it was a really good movie, but I definitely don't recommend it to people, or you would struggle to recommend it, like we
Yeah.
said before. Yeah.
This kind of leads into something that I want to talk about. I put it in my notes as like the top topic. So I was listening to a podcast the other day, and someone had this take, and I thought it was really interesting, and I've wanted to discuss it with someone ever since I heard it. That we're at we're at the moment we're desensitizing our stuff to things ourselves to things. For example, we have like super violent video games, we have super
Mm.
violent um, movies and entertainment, and the conversation is always around how that doesn't affect us. And this guy had this take where it was like he was a ex-war veteran, so he was like an American soldier, and he'd been to Afghanistan and stuff, and he was struggling with PTSD. Wow,
PTSD.
yep, struggled there for a second. And he was saying, he was like, uh, it's like this thing that they think where it's like, if you these days you're pushing more stuff into your subconscious and letting it like dwell there and dealing with it that
Yeah.
way, rather than like facing up and dealing with your problems. And he was like, I think that's this was his take on it. He was like, I think that's why we see such a larger proportion of society these days having mental health issues, even if it's like a very small mental health issue, is because he was like, we watch these super violent video games, and whereas if you're in war and you have to confront that, like killing someone, um,
Mhm.
if you're using it for entertainment and stuff, you're kind of like pushing it into your subconscious and dealing with it there. And I just thought it was a really interesting take, and thought I'd put it in there and see what you guys think about it.
Hmm. The data seems to show that it's right in saying that people are becoming desensitized to violent things, and it's less shocking to see violent things, that kind of thing. But it doesn't seem to be any evidence for violent video games and that causing people to become more violent. Not as of yet, anyway.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily saying that like causing them to become more violent, but I'm saying maybe it's ticking down. It's like almost passing the buck. When you say like, oh, like I'm desensitized, it doesn't affect me, instead of it actually affecting you, where you're like, oh my God, that was violent and I hate that and I didn't want to see that. You're kind of like, you're desensitized to it. So you're fine with it. You're like, yeah, it didn't affect me. But then there's like a pass the buck effect where you're actually going, all right, I'm not dealing with this up front because I'm desensitized and I'm passing it back on to my subconscious.
It does seem like it
deal with
would relate that way. It just, in the studies that they've done, it also doesn't seem to be translating so much into that. But I get it. It like makes sense that it would refer over.
Yeah, I just thought it was really
It
interesting.
makes sense.
Mm.
Yeah, makes sense, but I don't know if it's, you know, how it plays
Accurate.
out in actual effect.
No, yeah, 100%. It's one of those things just like study it, and
it's definitely it's something. So definitely something to like think about and consider when you're doing these things in like video games and stuff. I think you should try and give that some thought.
No, yeah, 100%. Especially if you're like if you're struggling in some way with mental health issues, like maybe being aware of the food that you're giving your body. You know, it's the same with any kind of illness, right? Like if you're struggling with something, they're like, well, be careful what you eat. You know, like it's the same thing, I guess. Be careful what you consume, what content you consume.
Garbage in, garbage out. Oh, my parents always used to say
that. I was kind of wanting to ask Rebel a question as well, as like probably the most hardcore gamer out of all of us, I'm assuming. Is that valid?
Whoa. I ain't no casual. I ain't no casual.
If we're going to rank us on tiers, then I guess you can do that.
Top.
Yeah. But just in terms of like, we're like as Western culture, we're pretty obsessed with murder, right? Like that's in terms of like, if you look at Netflix, it's all about serial killers. Like we're obsessed with it. It's a very small percentage of us that will experience it or know someone that's experienced it. Like it's very uncommon, but we like to simulate it. We like to experience it, and we are obsessed with it. So like, in terms of like the percentage of your games that are based around death or dying, Rebel, what would be like a percentage for you in terms of like the amount of games that you play? So like the maybe the first person shooters or like LOL or whatever else it is.
I feel like every game I play has something to do with death in it. Like if I think about the games that I played recently, RimWorld, where people come and raid your base and you kill them and your people die and you all kill each other. Civilization 5 and 6 I play a lot, which a big part of that game is nuking millions and millions of people. Which I don't know, I guess it's less visceral than like shooting someone in a first person shooter, but you know, it's still you're literally committing genocide in those games, you know? It's kind of crazy. So I would say probably I can't think of a game I've played recently that hasn't involved death in some way.
No, no Overcooked or what's the
Overcooked?
I have not played Overcooked in
Wait, is there
probably
death in
about a
Overcooked?
year. So
well, I mean, you fall off.
Yeah, I think you can burn to
edge,
death, right?
And you can burn.
I think you can burn in the fire.
Oh, even
actually,
the poor.
Yeah. That's an interesting point because I was trying to think about it. I mean, someone in chat said farming simulator.
Yeah. Those poor.
Your cows can die in that, right? If you don't feed your cows.
Guys, there's 2 vegetarians here at least.
Harvesting corn is vegetable murder.
But yeah, it's interesting. Like, I don't think it's rehearsal. Like we're not learning how to kill. But I also think we are interested in it, and by extension, I think we're always interested in dying and death. And I think I don't think that's a bad thing. Like as a you're right that the research doesn't show that violent video games are causing any issues. But I think it's like, how are you managing maybe the trauma or the negativity that you might associate with circumstances where you're kind of reflecting on your own life, or maybe someone's made you second guess, like maybe you do know a soldier who's experienced that and you're thinking, oh shit, maybe I need to rethink these things. Like
that's true for sure. And I think games also, like obviously you have to have an effective game, you have to have consequences within the game, like positive and negative consequences. And it started off low, like and it's gone up and up and up, and now dying is the consequence, and it doesn't get much worse than that. So once some games become about that, then all games become about that in a way, if you know what I mean. Like you still need to
Yeah,
have that
it's
incentives
a
to
ramp
keep
up.
like doing things in the game.
Yeah. And yeah, and for me it just comes back to, it's like, be careful what you're putting into your body, you know? Like these games are about this, and it's, you know, if you're struggling with something, then you need to be aware of the things that are potentially affecting you, even if there's no studies out yet that show it, you know?
Yeah.
I'm interested to talk about like our thoughts on happiness and I guess what it means to us. I know that Fresh, you put a little bit in here about happiness. What was you've got some percentages in here. Do you want to explain that one to us?
Yeah, I'll get there. I wanted to talk. So I was trying to think about. I was thinking a lot about mental health, obviously in preparation for this. But and I was thinking that the people with poorer mental health seem to have a different, like I was trying to compare myself because I feel like I generally have like quite a high level of happiness, I guess I'd say, and I've always kind of been that way. And people who seem to have poorer mental health have a baseline that's a little bit lower. So it's like bad stuff can happen to me, and that will affect my life. But if my baseline is already higher, then it seems to affect me less than people who've maybe a little bit lower on that line. But I watched this documentary on Netflix that was pretty good. It was, I think it was just called Happy, and it talked about where happiness comes from. So I wanted to also preface this by saying, like, it sounds like I'm just saying, like, be happy, don't be like, don't have mental health problems. Like, yeah.
Have you tried being happy?
Have you tried being happy? But it's a nice talking point. I don't want to sound like that. But it was talking about how happiness comes. Very interestingly, 50% of it was biological. So some people are more predisposed to being happier than others, which I found both saddening and also encouraging, because it's 50% is a large, half of it. But it means that the other half can be changed. 10% was your circumstances. So your financial settings and like how things are going in your life. It showed like all these examples of people who like pull around like those rickshaws and stuff, and they've got like no house. Their house is just like a shanty with like one wall and that kind of thing. But 40% came from the activities that you choose to participate in, your priorities, like your choices. So 40% of your happiness basically could be pretty effectively changed then and there. So like it gave some really good ways of trying to make yourself more happy.
Okay, that's interesting. It's really interesting. I'm probably going to go and watch that documentary, to be honest, because it sounds really interesting.
It is real cool.
That whole 50%, like from your just natural biology kind of thing is really interesting.
And it makes sense that like, so let's say the happiest. So let's say I feel like maybe 50%. So if like you have happiness as 100%, you could get to 100% happiness. Be the happiest person possible. So like I feel like maybe my 50% is like, somewhere in the 40s. So like I've got a high propensity to be quite happy. Whereas someone who struggles with depression, that kind of thing, might be like in the 10s, or like have a 3% predisposition to be happy. So they've got to really work hard to fill up the rest of their stuff with happiness. Otherwise they're going to struggle.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very interesting. It's a really cool doco.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
See, now I'm like, because lately, especially because I knew it was upcoming to winter, so I was like, I need to work on what is going to make me happy and keep my chin up this winter. So I've been focusing on, I've been my circumstances have changed financially, which is something that gives me a lot of stress lately. My finances are a lot better than they used to be, so that's helped a lot. And then I've been going to the gym like 5 or 6 times a week, and I've been focusing on creating, if it's for YouTube or for Twitch, and just being able to like focus my priorities on that instead of like relying on how other people value me. Like before in my life, it was very much if I was in a relationship with someone and that person, loved me and stuff, I was like, this is where I get my self-worth from, which was something that I think I relied on it so much, it was quite bad, quite toxic for me. So now I'm like focusing on these other things, putting my like actual thoughts into stuff. So you like, after you saying the percentages and stuff, I'm like, wow, I've actually like that makes sense to me, because I've been doing these things and I am happier for it, and I've been focusing on what is actually gonna keep me fulfilled and make me happy, and it's actually
definitely that's really good. Working at that 40%. I think one thing that you touched on, so both gym and like even making YouTube, gaming videos, stuff like that. They had this like section in the documentary called Flow, which was really, really cool. And it talked about like it's very hard to quantify, but you can get in this state of mind where you're in flow, and you kind of don't think about the stuff around you. You're like heavily involved in something. So for me, I would feel like that's maybe basketball for me, or it could be gaming or streaming as well, where you're locked into the moment and you're just like loving that time, and stuff kind of outside fades into existence. And they called it flow, and that was something that was really, really good for people's happiness.
Yeah. Does this kind of lead in a little bit to Zach put something in there in the document about, and he touched on it just before, but about how people use fighting or dancing or heavy metal and stuff, like to help them process emotionally, and not necessarily for the processing part, but for the happiness. Like, how does that translate? Where it's like you use these things um, to better your like happiness level. Is it like a good thing, or is it a bad thing that we have to be doing these things to try to make ourselves feel happier? I don't know.
I love it. I think it's great. I think and some people are talking about it in the comments here, but exercise, people will tell you constantly, if you go out for a run, there's a very high chance that you'll receive a massive amount of endorphins and you'll feel good. For a lot of us who don't really like that, you can find endorphins in other ways, and that can be really good in kind of purging how you're feeling. There's a lot of research that shows that heavy metal is probably the happiest culture on earth when it comes to music.
Really? That's
yeah,
insane. Wow.
they say angry music for happy people, and that's the kind of the mantra of it right now. And for other people, that might come from like extremely aggressive hip hop. It can come from a banger, like, so just like singing your favorite tunes. It can a lot of people you might feel quite active when it comes to what's the I can't keep up, but like what was the latest one, like trap and grime, and I don't think red sing's a thing anymore, but like the all these subcultures are helping us, or whether it's artwork as well, like you can create a terrifying fucked up image, and it's it's a way of you removing or like kind of expressing how you're feeling.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'll let other people speak, but
No,
I did
yeah,
want
it's
to
good.
what I was trying to get at with the question is it are these things like band-aids on another kind of problem that we need to deal with, or is it good that we're actively trying to improve our mental health through these things?
I think,
or is it better to
think
just be like I know it makes me feel better, but it's kind of like a temporary fix to like what is a deeper issue, and I really need to seek help.
I feel like it's complicated, right? Because some things are a more deep-seated issue and you need help, but also mental health is an ongoing thing, and this is, somewhat of an ongoing, maybe not a solution, like you say, maybe a band-aid, but it's an ongoing way of managing it. So I think there's sort of, I guess it depends on what you're dealing with, but yeah, it's hard to look at it. It's hard to look at mental health as a whole as like a wound that needs fixing. So I think just for general mental health, stuff like that will help you process.
Yeah.
But for, deep underlying issues, then maybe it is more of a band-aid on a wound sort of type thing that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, I think if it's part of your, and like life is busy, and we don't always have time to have a regular scheduled appointment with a psychologist or whatever else, and they will ask you then, like, how are you managing, like what's your self-care plan like, and that might be a term that we will hear quite a lot, is in terms of self-care, or your employer might ask you how your self-care is as well. And it's really just that, how do you manage to cope each day when you don't have that support available, which is quite often, like we don't have full-time access to mental health professional. So I really encourage people to find things that, when they are feeling sad or angry, or emotions that we do consider negative, what are some things that puts you in a good mood, and why can't you abuse those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like I know there's a lot of stigma that sorry, stigma is not the right word, but I think we jump to the fact that like feeling sad and feeling angry is like a negative state. And when we're talking about, and also I think in terms of like when we talk about curing depression or curing anxiety,
Mm,
they don't really go away, and you're always going to be in a place where you feel sad or angry, and those are really important emotions to feel. And if we look at evolution, like feeling scared or feeling angry or feeling depressed, they've all allowed us to survive
mm,
in certain situations. It's when
exactly.
we it's when we overuse them, and or when we are trapped inside them. And I'm sure someone who's always happy probably really exhausted people as well. um,
Yeah.
so I think, and I'm glad that mental health is coming to a spot where we are um, reclaiming all emotions as good emotions, and we're not
Mm,
really trying to make people feel bad for feeling sad or feeling angry, because
mm,
I have really legitimate reasons why. And if
definitely.
like putting on Parkway Drive makes you feel better about that, I think that's a good place. It's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I really like that way of looking at it, that like the reclaiming emotions, where it used to be like, if you're feeling this way, then it's bad thing, and like you need to toughen up and you need to be happy. Happy is the only good emotion,
Mm,
and the only way that you should be trying to live your life.
mm, mm,
And I like that idea of that around the awareness of around raising awareness around mental health issues. It's a way of being like, look, man, it's just because you're feeling sad doesn't mean that that's necessarily a bad thing.
mm.
Like, which is, yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it. I really like that.
A lot of the time, I don't know if I've just been thinking about this while you're talking, Zach. I don't know if you just completely anecdotally, but trying to help people. It sounds like it almost sounds silly if you say people should become more happy when there's something serious going on, obviously. But if there is not too much going on and someone genuinely has some mental health issues, and they're not feeling the best, the hardest thing that I can find sometimes is when young people almost don't want to. They're in a place where they don't see the value of being happy again. I don't know if that makes sense. But
Mm,
it feels, maybe it feels just intrinsic to us to say, well, why would you not want to be happy, right? You want to live your best life. But if
Mm.
someone's in that place, very often they're just thinking, what's the point in even trying to be happy again? So is there
yeah,
I find that the hardest to deal with in a way, I guess, or to help people out of
yeah,
that.
yeah. And not to give a bulletproof answer to your question, like a
Yeah.
silver bullet, but
Yeah.
I in the same vein of thinking, like I find as well, I really struggle with young people who they've only ever received attention or love
Mm,
or concern when they are in crisis.
yes.
Because
Yes.
how do you possibly change their way of thinking if the only
Mm.
time anyone's given a shit about them is when they're sad?
Yeah, when it's constantly reinforced that you will get attention because there's a problem.
Yeah,
Yeah. And the only answer, I guess, is the long-term solution of giving them love and attention when they're doing well. But that's very hard to.
yeah, and that conditioning takes a lot of
A long
time.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't have I always think the best thing I can do is give them all my knowledge and all my support, and
Mm,
then just make sure I'm very effective in referring them to the right resources, or making sure that they do see a clinical psychologist, whether that's like a youth trained one or otherwise, or
mm,
um, but I think I think it does come back to what resources are going to be like very non-judgmental of what you're going through.
yeah.
Um,
Yep.
they can acknowledge that you're feeling a certain way, but they're not going to kind of indulge it either. Like they're going to be very intentional about, we're
Mm,
going to fix it this way, or
yep.
what works best for you. How do you think that? And I think that's a good thing, that in terms of how mental health frameworks have changed in terms of services,
Yeah.
is it's coming a lot more to that hope and optimism space, and about really acknowledging that people are the experts on their own recovery. Like
Mm.
people know themselves best, and I think we get really good at pretending like we know how other people think, but
Yeah.
it really does come down to that individual. And I'm sure when you've worked with those individuals, you've found your way alongside them. It's not always been the way that you think was going to work. Maybe
Yeah.
it was like, oh, they love like aggressive hip hop. Maybe it's something to do with that, whatever else.
Yeah, no, actually, when you were talking about that, I was like, oh man, that's so
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, maybe you just need someone speaking profanely for like 20 bars
Yeah.
to like but
Yeah.
there's a lot of new resources coming out. Some people in chat and you guys might have heard of the Black Dog kind of idea related to depression and anxiety.
I have. I
Um,
think there was like an advertising campaign for or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
if anyone's interested, you can just Google the phrase, I have a black dog and his name is depression.
Yep.
And it's a dude talking about how he has this dog that's always going to exist. Some days it's a wolf, some days it's a 2-story building,
Yeah.
some days it's like a puppy that's nipping your heels. Like you don't get rid of the dog, and it can be a learning experience, but your management of him kind of dictates how your day is going to go and how bad he's going to treat you.
Mm.
Yeah, it's really
And
cool. There's a few different books. We've got a few of them at school, and they're really cool for. It was actually, I mean, I know a lot about mental health issues, I guess already, but those like that like fantasy style that they talk about it in was like really, really good for me understanding heaps more.
Yeah.
yeah,
Is it wasn't an Australian? Is it an Australian thing, Zach?
I think it was an Aussie author, yeah.
Yeah.
And then they kind of built this charity around him.
Nice.
But yeah, and they talk a lot about that, how
Yeah.
it really is different for everyone. And one thing that we've not talked about today, but in terms of like if you are at a point, or you're finding that antidepressants are a good option for you, whilst for other people they might have really bad side effects that might not work for them. So how do you kind of balance, or how do you replace antidepressants when you're either coming off them or you find they're not really working for you? How are you chasing those good feelings if your serotonin isn't being influenced by a drug? Lots of different ways that we might pursue that. Sometimes it's buying a lamp to be beside your bed, like we've got Rebel's got his different ways
Vitamin
of
D.
dealing with his chemicals, that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
There are. I have noticed the emergence of so many more. Like you didn't mention it. You mentioned the Black Dog one, but the Are You Okay Day. I don't know if it's worldwide or not, but like in Australia, where there's like a specific day, or I feel like there's been like several Are You Okay days this year. Is that a thing where they're like trying to increase the frequency of them, or I don't know.
Usually it's like a week of stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just a week, but yeah, and like I know that my workplace does stuff with it. So when the Are You Okay week is happening, they send out like campaigns and stuff, not for public view, for like back of house restaurant stuff, where it's like, hey, like let's raise awareness on this issue. And it also, I put in my notes, act, belong, commit, which is like I think it's like the WA or actually it might be just like a private organization where they're like, it's about trying to positively affect lives. So it's like if you're not suffering like a serious issue, these are ways that you can potentially try to mitigate, but it's all about positivity stuff. It's a positive outlook on it, rather than like a negative, like you need to seek help, like you need to which is not, I mean, not to say that that's a negative thing, but quite often it's perceived as negative still. And I find I'm really enjoying having more of that kind of stuff around.
It's just really good for normalizing that in culture to it doesn't really, it's not like a meme, but it almost becomes like a funny thing sometimes, but also very serious, like just going around to all your mates on that day and be like, are you okay? That's how you kind of implement things that become normal in culture. I think that's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one thing, I think for us as millennials. What's the millennial cutoff? 97, something like that?
I think
I
yeah,
don't
I
know.
I
think we're
think so, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
are we
So,
millennials?
like, yeah,
Yeah,
I think we are.
let's
But,
just
like,
say we are.
for us, like, we all kind of, like, have different strategies, and as millennials, we kinda adopted this whole, like, self-deprecation, memeing kinda thing, and I think I love it. I think it's
Mm.
incredible that we've kind of created a way of coping and just like a way of kind of sharing and people being like, "Oh, that's me too," through memes of uh, I think there was one. It was like just something to take the edge off or something, and it was like someone pouring like pictures of dogs into their hand instead of pills and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Like,
Mm.
I think memes have actually been kind of like a strategy that we've created as millennials
Yeah.
to kind of deal with this.
I
And
think that I
Yeah.
think that memes it's really interesting to like look into like the meme culture because it's our way of like having like really serious discussions, but like and
yeah,
like bringing really serious stuff to the foreground while keeping everything like light and happy. I don't know.
yeah.
I really enjoy like looking through meme threads on Reddit and stuff like that.
For sure.
That's
And
funny
sometimes
as.
that's what you need. That's like sometimes that's the
Yeah,
that
yeah.
stops you from
That's how
thinking
I
more
cope. That's
clearly.
yeah. That's my
That's
medication
your
is
catharsis.
Reddit,
Is memes,
Reddit, Reddit
Reddit
memes,
threads.
Reddit threads. Scary.
Yeah,
r/woke memes.
but yeah, I think as well it's just like it is that normalization. Like we're not alone. Everyone feels this, and I think we
Mm,
need to. I don't think you are immune to it. Like I don't know if that's controversial, but I think we all will suffer, and that's a bad word as well. But I think we'll all experience issues with our mental health at some stage,
Mm,
and
yeah.
not all services will be right for us. In fact, I reckon most services won't be right for you. It'll be
Mm,
about trying and testing and seeing what works for you, and whether that's like a drug or like a program or just like a conversation with someone. I think
mm.
mm.
we're all having a shit time, and
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
all
Yeah.
trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
I've definitely said that to someone before when they were struggling with the whole is this normal? Like I feel like I'm abnormal.
Mm,
And
Mm,
this is something that I've gone through as well, where I was like, oh my god, like, like I'm sick, I'm unwell, and I that almost contributed to my like anxiety and stuff like that. And I kind of came to terms with it by going like by reaching that point where I realized that hey, like every single person on earth at some point struggles with mental health of
mm,
varying degrees. You know, like it might even just be like, oh, they had a really bad day that day, you know, but like that is technically like a mental health issue,
mm,
right? It was
mm,
just right on the lowest end, you know, like,
mm,
and some people are happy all the time, but coming to the realization that like we all at some point in our lives struggle with mental health issues really helped me be like, oh, okay, this is not I'm not like a freak. I'm not unwell. I'm not like there's nothing wrong with me. This is a normal part of me being a human being that I have to learn to deal with it and learn how to manage myself and manage my mental health better.
yeah,
And that was a really positive thing for me is coming to that realization. And I've definitely passed that on that like realization on to other people, whether or not they've accepted it or not. But that whole, yeah, like you're not you're not abnormal because you're suffering with this. Um,
Yeah.
I wanted to
mm,
touch a little bit on medication, which you brought up a little bit there. That I was like that whole the whole medication kind of weirds me out a little bit because it it in my head I relate it to this like one size fits all kind of remedy, and I feel like it's almost like a product of. And I know that people obviously chemical balances and stuff like that, it can really help people. So I'm not saying that we should like get rid of it completely, but I feel like medication and over medicating and stuff, these issues comes from like past generations where it was like they were trying to like find they try to find this like one size fits all fix for things, and they want to just like take an issue and be like, "Yep, we solved it. Yeah, sweet, it's all good."
mm,
And I've the more that the more that I get involved in this issue, and I find out people around me that have struggled with things in the past and stuff like that, the more I hear them talk about, the more cases I've heard talked about where they're like, man, I like medication actually was like really, really bad for me. Um,
Yeah.
I know that it does have, I'm sure that there are positives to it as well. And everybody's different. And that's what I'm saying. Like, it's good to have that there as an option. But do you guys feel like we definitely went down that path for a while where it was like, everybody like, oh, let's just push medication at people?
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely a few sides to it. And it also did weird me up quite a bit until I did some pharmacology units at uni and like learnt a lot about how they're called like SSRIs and that, how the antidepressants work. And I was like, oh wow, that's like totally makes sense. But I see areas where people are over medicated and where people are under medicated, and obviously it's not ideal to ever be on medication your whole life if you don't have to be. But if society gives you a gift that works and like works really well for you, I think you're crazy not to take it and roll with it. But I do see flip sides where people are not so you've got either young people who very clearly need testing and I don't know, I'm not able to diagnose if they need medication, but have to, like, they're struggling, but parents and people of our generation, probably more so our parents' generation, or like at least in between, have a huge stigma around, I'm not going to let my child be known as a person on medication or be known as a person who has mental health difficulties and that kind of thing, and they really struggle for a long time because of that. So that's a huge negative in an area that I could see where kids might need medication. But then on the flip side, like, it totally depends on the doctor. And like we were saying before, maybe it's a bit of a money thing where you go on in and they give you a pill and send you away and don't have to deal with you again. And the best outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely, I struggled a little bit when it came to getting help when I approached my doctor and they were very, and this was, I went to a few different doctors and they were very, uh, like kind of send me away ish. Like the amount I probably left a doctor's office probably 5 times feeling as though they had just fobbed me off and been like, oh no, like this is not something that they wanted to deal with at the time or that they had time for in the session that I'd picked or all that kind of stuff. And it, like, I actually thought in this day and age, I don't know if it's just a product of the people that I'm around and where I live, where I thought that it would be different. But I definitely found that it was, I definitely had a negative experience when it came to like trying to get diagnosed or trying to not get diagnosed, but trying to like seek help, medical help, I guess you would put it.
Yeah, I think for I don't know much about your experience, Rebel, being a bit younger than us, but for us in the approaching 30 bracket, we definitely experienced that. Well, I know what you're saying, Matt, and also for myself, but we grew up in that era where mental health wasn't really acknowledged to begin with, and we kind of paid the price for that. But for the GPs or like your general doctor, they very much had that idea of like, here's your, like, we'll give you Prozac and fuck off. And I think for young people now, there's more opportunity to go to somewhere that has a bit more intention about actually spending time with you and getting to know you and treating you the way that works.
Yeah.
For me, I was on 3 different antidepressants over 3 years because the first 2 didn't work for me at all, and were actually very unhelpful and made me feel a lot worse about myself. And then the third time was the charm, and I was on them for quite a while, and now I can say that I'm off them. But I guess the way that I've always described it is, and I think it's a really good metaphor for anxiety and depression, is it's kind of like the ocean. Like some days it's going to be really stormy, and some days it's going to be pretty flat. But it's constant. The ocean does not stop for you. It's forces outside of your control. It's not, you don't cure the ocean either. Like the waves will hit, and it's about you managing the waves.
Mm.
And I think antidepressants, really good pair of floaties. So you're still gonna like chuck you around, and you're still gonna feel pretty bad and pretty shit, but like you're not gonna drown. And I think that would be a blanket for a lot of people, but obviously not everyone.
Mm.
But what are you doing? What are you doing in the meantime to actually build your boat? Like, how are you going to go from having like a pair of floaties or one of those like ducky things that you sit in to actually like a boat that works and that can actually like break the waves?
Yeah.
And like, how are you learning to realize when the waves hit you, or when they're rising above you, or when you get the opportunity to kind of duck underneath them or go over them? Like, how are you making sure that you are finding ways that it works for you?
Yeah.
And then one day maybe you won't need the floaties anymore because you're in like a sweet $1 million yacht or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, but you
That's
need
that's a
to.
cool
I
metaphor.
think we need to take responsibility and actually begin to manage our mental health better and take ownership of that process.
And using that
So
metaphor, you could like I'm trying to think of, so maybe you could think like psychs fit in as like swimming instructors or scuba instructors or something, where
or
they're
a
helping
dolphin.
you.
Interesting.
Or
A
a
dolphin.
dolphin. Where they're
A
helping
dolphin
you
is
to
definitely
like
cuter.
yeah, okay, they can be the dolphins, so they help you and
Yeah,
then they help you
but
at
not a
some
killer
point
whale that they
learn how to
scream.
swim without the floaties.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you think that there's some people that though that they don't, that they're looking for a one like a pill that solves all their problems, and so they don't put in that extra work to like try to get better. They just think, oh yeah, I've got a pill, therefore I'm gonna this is all fixed now. Is there people that are
Yeah,
looking for that?
yeah, I think so. And some people might find it. They might find that like taking an antidepressant works really well for them.
Mm,
What they don't, a lot of the time they'll not tell you though all the side effects. So
interesting.
you can feel really, you can be feeling better, but then for me anyway, I'm speaking anecdotally now, but I felt a lot better. Like I wasn't feeling things as hard,
Hmm.
but I actually kind of lost a bit too much of how I was feeling about everything. So I became pretty apathetic about a lot of different things. I also gained a lot of weight, and these are the kind of things that they don't really tell you. So I was getting kind of, I wasn't feeling great because of feeling like my body had changed, and uh, putting all this effort into exercise and not knowing why I wasn't seeing any results.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then once I did get to a place where I was managing how I was feeling, and I was like, I really do miss feeling things more. I found myself in a place where I came off them, and then I lost all this weight, and I felt really good about myself. And but I hadn't realized what happened in terms of the side effects. And sometimes you need those side effects to avoid what inevitably might be something a lot worse, which is the situation that I was in. So it's yeah,
Interesting.
it's kind of can be a catch-22. Can have different ways of going about things. Yeah, it's and I think that's just testament to everyone needs to spend some time thinking about what works best for them,
Yeah.
and really take ownership of that, and not expect the miracle pill.
Miracle cure. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
100%.
I do find that interesting how things spiral down, like you're saying with if you, so you're already feeling anxious and you're already feeling at quite a low in your mental health, and then you start taking something that makes you put on weight, so maybe your relationships are already suffering because you're not in a good place, and then they start to suffer more because your self-esteem and your self-worth is not great. And then like it's just this, and then maybe like you lose a job because you not able to perform because you're not able to be in the right mental space, and then that leads you into
No,
like I don't
spirals.
know, losing friends, and then instead of drinking with friends, you're
Mhm.
drinking alone, and then like it's just like this like constant exponential downhill of it's not like everything randomly happened at once. It's kind of linked, but really unfortunate that it all kind of happens like that. It's yeah, so I don't really have a point with that. It's just kind of a very sad
No,
observation that
No,
it kind
yeah.
of works
yeah,
that way.
Mm. Yeah.
um,
Oh, you go.
sorry, I was gonna ask Rebel another question in regards to um, you don't have to share too much, but just in terms of do you find like a compounding effect in terms of like your SAD and maybe some of the other I forget what you said, sorry, in terms of like if you experience the anxiety and depression, but do you find that
Uh,
it kind of can cascade on you or
yeah, I guess, like to an extent, like I don't know if it's anxiety or depression, but like loneliness has always been a big factor in my life. So like it will be like if I'm feeling lonely, and then winter comes around, and then it just compounds, and it does get worse, and it does get to the point where it things will just sort of stack up on each other, and it yeah, and I think that is the way that all of these things kind of work. It always ends up being one thing on top of another that leads you down this route that is darker, I guess.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah,
Mm.
if that answers the question.
yeah. They stack up. Yeah.
Yeah,
They
I
do
definitely
stack up.
I
It's,
definitely
it's
find that.
definitely a thing.
Mm,
Yeah, no, 100%. That whole like um the more problems that you're trying to deal with at once, it's definitely helpful to try to reduce the things that you're dealing with when you're struggling to deal with things,
mm.
right? Like
Yeah.
I feel like that just is like common sense, right? It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you're struggling to cope with things, therefore try to remove the things that you're struggling with
Mm.
so that you
Yeah.
can like cope with one thing at a time,
Like
you know?
like reshift your focus in a way and like and draw things back. Like
Mm.
I'm sure somebody who's in a real bad place isn't necessarily thinking about their like career path for 5 years time because they're struggling
Yeah, no.
enough. So you just got to keep
Yeah.
bringing it in, like reining it in, getting closer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was, to be honest, that was part of the reason that I took a step back in my work, uh, responsibility wise, voluntarily, because realized that I was trying to deal with something that I needed more time and headspace to deal with. And
Mhm.
there were other reasons as well, but that was definitely for me that was like, okay, cool. Like this is potentially going to be a benefit to me because I can now focus on my mental health a little bit more than I was at the time, which was, to be honest, I was
Mhm.
just like shoving it to the side and pushing it down and going like, I don't have time to deal with this right now. I'm like trying to reach career goals or
Yeah.
whatever I was trying to do,
Mm.
you know? So that's definitely one instance of where I've like I've realized that I'm trying to cope and deal with too much in my life and I needed to
Mhm.
try to like reduce so that it didn't start like cascading on me and becoming, and then it became like another problem that I was dealing with, you know? And I think that,
Mm,
yeah,
Yeah.
I think I definitely think that's something to be said there where um, things just can cascade on people, and
Yeah.
that's an important thing to look at when you're trying to like manage your mental health.
Yeah, most definitely. And it helps to
Um,
like break things down and deal with them one at a time. And I think when
Mm.
you focus on your mental health, you end up being more
Definitely.
productive in other aspects of your life anyway, because
Yeah,
you'll be more motivated, and you'll be able to look at things a little bit more objectively as well. It
yeah.
overall is probably, yeah, it's just a good way
yeah.
to look at things.
Mm.
No, absolutely.
I wanted to
Yeah.
get a little bit into, I think every single one of us have mentioned like stigma in some way in our notes. I feel like we've been like fairly positive overall, on this podcast, and I feel like we all have fairly positive views on the fact that like we're kind of like heading in the right direction in terms of there's more awareness around this issue, and it's more common to be able to discuss it with friends and people without getting judged and stuff like that. But do you guys have any experiences where negative experiences where you've seen this like negative stigma around mental health firsthand?
Yeah.
Mm.
So for me, this is sort of the main thing I want to talk about, and I've always wanted to sort of talk about this and express it to like
Mm,
my peers online, but I'm always worried about sort of accidentally glorifying things I don't mean to, which is
yep.
a silly worry, and I don't think I'll do it. But I wanted to wait until I was with you guys, because I feel like Fresh is sometimes my translator when it comes to issues like this. I'll be like, I think this and this, and he's like, you mean this. So I wanted to sort of bring this up more with you guys,
He goes,
so I don't
he,
accidentally say the wrong thing.
yeah,
Yeah. So I used to self harm a lot. So I used to like cut myself and stuff. But it was at a point in my life where I felt like I wasn't in control of anything, and the one thing I could do was control what happened to my own body.
yep,
So I would go and do this thing, and
Mm.
I felt like I couldn't tell anyone about it, because it was like this thing. The stigma around it was like, you do that to try and like end your life or whatever, but I wasn't doing that. It was just a control thing, and I was trying to deal with it. And I was like, now reflecting back on it, now I've stopped, and I'm like, I'm okay, more okay anyway. It's like I want to be able to talk about that, and I think there should be open discussion about it, and people shouldn't. I feel like you shouldn't be ashamed of like self-harm or self-medication, although it is like a bad thing. And this is where I'm worried about, like, I don't want to glorify it, right? It's like you shouldn't be ashamed of it, but at the same time you still shouldn't do it. And I get kind of confused on how I want to phrase my thoughts around this part, because there is this thing of like, if I did tell anyone, they looked at me like, you're an idiot, why are you doing that? Just like, it's so dumb. And it felt like something that I was really using to cope with everything that I needed to do. And I feel like, and we need more open discussion about things like this, and these coping mechanisms that we make for ourselves that aren't necessarily healthy, obviously. And there just needs to be open discussion about it, but like without glorifying it or being like, it's okay, because it is okay, but also it's really not okay. And that's where I kind of get like, that's where I wanted to talk to you guys about it and be like, opinions.
It is a very difficult one, because you do have to, there is that, it's like you want to make it more accepting, but like you also have to like set a boundary as well. Like there has to be some sort of boundary that you set where you say, well, like, look, like it's okay and we accept you and whatever, but we're doing that so you can potentially stop doing it, right? And no, I definitely get what you mean when we are struggling and you don't want to glorify it, but that, like, man, that's so difficult.
It's really good that you're able to share that though, dude. Thanks heaps. It's something that is good to be talked about. They've even started changing, maybe in an effort to change the stigma around it. They've started changing the language around. So it used to be, people always used to say self-harm, whereas now it's changed in the last few years, I believe, to non-suicidal self-injury. So it's like implying that you're not trying to actually end your life. It's a coping mechanism for dealing with emotional issues, I guess, in a physical way, in a way. Yeah.
See, I've never heard that before, so that's quite interesting. That's like a nice step. Like when I was like going through that and, you know, talking to school guidance counselors effectively and stuff, it was just like, it was self-harm, and it was, I don't know.
And they're like, are you trying to kill yourself?
Sort of perspective on it.
It's
and I'm like, no.
And I think
it makes it a different thing.
I think there's something to be said for like breaking down people into like what they are actually doing, you know, like it's not not just lumping everybody into like once again, this comes back to that like one size fits all kind of issue where it's like, okay, well, if you're hurting yourself in any way, then you're borderline suicidal, you know, and breaking that down into different types of self-harm and whatever is really important for getting people the help that they need and the right help that they need. So that's a really good thing, I think.
I think that's very true. And I think coming back to what you said, Rebel, about like feeling ashamed about that, I think this is something that Australia we aren't great at. I think Australia, I'm speaking for myself here, but I think we're a very young country, and so we are very insecure, and we are jealous and all sorts of other things towards other cultures, and we're a bit maybe a bit embarrassed and a bit vulnerable that we don't have an established culture yet, so we kind of hold on to a few things that we know, or things that we've been labeled as over the years. And I think one of them is this she'll be right culture, or like and also kind of this like tall poppy culture as well, which is, you know, like cutting people down when they like want to celebrate or like feel good about themselves,
especially guys.
Especially dudes, and we've all heard the like masculinity conversations about how it's overdue to have a bit of a redefining of what we count as being a man in Australia. But and I think part of that is not being ashamed about when you're not being ashamed when you're practicing non-suicidal self-injury, or when you're trying to cope with something, because if it's not shameful to do that because it's not shameful to be asking for help. And I think we need to redefine how we feel about asking for help and needing help as well. I think, especially here in Australia. So, and
I
yeah,
think
yeah. Sorry.
I think that a lot of it comes down to like people like needing to not wanting to deal with other people's issues as well. I think like I know that was kind of my experience a bit, or like I definitely struggled a little bit with sharing with my friends and stuff like that. One, because I didn't want to be a burden on them, but also because, and I mean, this might be like a stigma in my head, but like they've all got their own problems and stuff that's going on. And like for me to put that burden on them, I like really shied away from, like really shied away from it. But at the same time, it's like when people are like, if you approach someone and they express that attitude, could it be coming that the attitude of like, oh, like, well, like toughen up, or like go and like deal with it yourself? Is it coming from a place where they're saying like, hey, I can't help you, I can't like deal with this?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that. Oh, sorry. There you go. Fresh.
Oh no, I was. Oh man, no, yeah. I don't mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's part insecurity, and also part just not really knowing how they could support as well.
Out.
Yeah. I was
I
gonna
think,
say it's probably like not knowing what to do, so awkwardly,
yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that quite a lot of the stigma as well comes from the person looking for help? They kind of like they put this stigma out there, or like because like even just then I talked about that I there wasn't necessarily stuff coming from my friends that would give me the idea that they wouldn't be welcome to chat and stuff like that. In fact, quite the opposite. But I created that stigma in my own head and applied it to them. So then, do you think that there's something to be said for potentially that stigma is almost reinforced by people with mental health issues?
Yeah. So sorry to cut everyone off. I try
No,
not
keep
to
going.
speak too much.
No,
Sorry,
it's
go
good.
ahead.
What you're saying is good.
Yeah.
I think usually if you're second guessing your friend's intent to help you, or if you're feeling like you're a bother, that's usually a good indicator that you're experiencing a level of anxiety. There's in CBT they talk about, also cognitive behavioral therapy. They talk about depressive logical mistakes. So those are like things that your brain will do, and you have to think, actually, no, that's just a loop that I'm caught in. And they call them logical mistakes, but a lot of those come from like that overgeneralization, or mislabeling, or disqualifying the positive. So like if you have friends that you know are supportive, you'll immediately say, oh, that doesn't count for some reason.
Yeah.
And that's not really that's not something that actually exists. That's something you've kind of created for yourself.
Yeah.
Or fortune telling, so like making a negative prediction,
Or mind
and
reading.
being like, oh, that's definitely going to happen. That's a fact. That's definitely happening.
And then feeling like you can actually perceive what people think of you when you're just projecting your own poor self-image.
Yeah, that definitely that mislabeling. Or Matt ignored me once, so he will always ignore me. Or like, he was busy that day. He was busy because he was pretending to be busy, and he actually didn't want to talk to me. Like, definitely that also that catastrophizing of like exaggerating the importance of things that we've done as well. So like, if you did a little mistake, you're like, okay, well, that little mistake's, and it kind of what Fresh was talking about in terms of, you might have like dropped your food at lunch or something, and then the end point of your thought is like, and that's how Dad's gonna die, or something like that. Like you definitely spiral in a way. But if you look up depressive logical mistakes, you can find a whole bunch, and they're great for helping you to identify if you are actually feeling what you're feeling, or if your brain is kind of stuck in a loop.
Interesting.
And yeah, there's a lot of different ones as well. I've actually just pulled some more up here now, but that emotional justification as well. So like I feel hopeless, therefore things are hopeless. Like we just don't know. You just don't know enough, and our brains are very limited in what we can feel. And we personalize things a lot. We take credit for things that we don't actually have control over as well.
Yes. Just generalized catastrophic feeling as well. So, you know, the like worst case situation thoughts all the time.
Yeah, and expecting it as well.
Yeah,
I think that's a big part of it.
It's really interesting. I've never thought about it like, but it totally makes sense when you think about it. That like you're struggling with something and your cognitive reasoning isn't like all that it's not at its on its A game. You know what I mean?
And then the bloody spiral happens, man, because you're already struggling, and then you start to think, oh, actually, you start like projecting your thoughts onto your friends. Oh man, that person didn't smile at me today. Like they must hate me, or I must have done something wrong. And then you start like running through all the things in your head, and anxiety builds up. It's just this like bad pattern of thought.
Definitely, and communication is usually how we resolve it. But communication can also be what can make it worse, or for and this is a whole nother podcast, but that's how gaslighting is so effective. And for those who don't know what gaslighting is, it's the kind of intentionally feeding information to people, or insinuating or labeling people that they are insane or not of sound mind or lacking insight, and in a way to actually manipulate and abuse them. And it comes from taking advantage of these logical mistakes that we make. And we've definitely talked about it enough today in terms of stigma, but just the whole labels of crazy and insane, when anxiety and depression really don't fit into those categories, and mental health is kind of broadly brought under this like idea of maybe someone with quite severe case of bipolar or schizophrenia. I think in the UK it's called psychosis. Is that right, Rebel?
Sorry.
Psychosis.
It's like
schizophrenia. Is
it? I don't know if we call it schizophrenia or psychosis. I think it's schizophrenia is a more common term I hear thrown around.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. Like, obviously, I'm not trained or a professional or anything, so I don't know what the official name is in the UK. But I've definitely.
I thought it might have a different name. But we do broadly categorize anxiety and depression under as if it is a severe mental health disorder or issue. When really, even in the spectrum of schizophrenia or bipolar, very manageable, very happy lives for a lot of people that have those disorders. So we kind of, and I guess Hollywood plays a big part in that as well.
Yes,
we have a very clear definition of what mental health looks like, and it's very wrong.
Is that something we can help by like breaking these mental disorders down into smaller chunks, like happened with self-harm that we just discussed, like being like, okay, calling out anxiety or like saying that you're suffering from anxiety is not helpful, when we need to say that you're suffering from something that seems like way like a less severe thing, you know, because because there's obviously like all disorders have like a spectrum, you know what I mean? Like there's not one size fits all. We come back to, I said that so many times, that's my favorite word this podcast, but like
it's a few words, mate. But I know what you mean. Like it, and as the science comes out, oh god, always bloody Nazis, mate. But as the like science keeps coming out about like the different disorders, so we have like we had, I guess everything was just broadly put under depression for a while, almost. I feel like when I was younger, then they had like anxiety and depression, and then they had. And now we've got things like generalized anxiety disorder, and you have social anxiety, you have PTSD, you have all these different. They're able to most of the time correctly, I guess, identify what kind of what's actually happened and why these things are going on a bit, and that helps a little bit with stigma, because it's for a lot of people like the appeal to authority, I guess, makes it a bit more real. If you've got an actual diagnosis, makes it a little bit less stigmatized. But it's very hard to change culture in a short amount of time. So it's like Zach said, Hollywood plays a huge part in it and has for many, many generations. Even I still know that my parents' generation, like, I don't know if it will change for them. They're old, you know. They're like pretty set in their ways. It's almost like a failing of like character if you were to go to see a psych because you know something wrong with you, kind of thing. So these things really play into, you know, children and even my generation. So it's a real tough one to keep changing. But I'm confident that we're taking the right steps, and I'm very encouraged that we're going in the right direction with it.
Yeah. Lest we get into the topic of how important the role of parents in child's development. Again, that's another thing that we come every cast. We're just like, goddamn, parent your children better.
That and Nazis, one of the two, always.
I think I feel like the specificity of being able to identify things separately and being more localized is really nice, because it's that thing of sort of knowing your enemy, and once you know what you're dealing with, it's easier to look into ways, you know, within yourself and externally to be able to deal with these things. Like for me, just hearing that it's not just self-harm anymore, and there's different, you know, there's the non-suicidal and stuff, that like that's like such a nice thing for me to hear. If anyone is, you know, like going through what I went through, and if they're getting that kind of help, I think honestly just the change of phrasing and the fact that there is potentially a better understanding in the different types of stuff would have helped me like a lot. So it's like really nice to hear that, you know, I think the specificity will genuinely help.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think anything that promotes ownership is really good. Like if you have a better, I think if you can say like, okay, now that I know what it is, I'm like, I can deal with this. And it's like making the elephant, eating the elephant one bite at a time, I think they say. Is you know how to take the first bite then. One thing we haven't mentioned yet, which I think is really important to draw attention to, is here in Australia, and this is a bit of a shocking stat, but the leading cause of death in young people who identify as LGBTQI plus is suicide, which is insane. Sorry to pardon the expression, but that is
it's really
that's
sad.
incredible. That's it's and part of that, a lot of that comes, there's almost I believe there's a causal link, a correlation between that and homophobia, and homophobia communicated through bullying. It's a shocking statistic, but it's real. The data doesn't lie. You know, those young people have lost their lives because of our mismanagement, one, of understanding people, and two, of their mental health. Sorry to bring the vibe of the Twitch down, but
no.
It's real.
I think that there's definitely something to be said there, and it's so sad to see like a failing of society where when you see, like, surely when you see a suicide rate like that, or like a statistic like that, you go, okay, like as society, let's throw our resources into this. Let's figure out this problem and how we can deal with it. And I think it's really sad that it's it's been that way for a long time, like way too long, you know, and it's really sad to see like a failing of society so great when it comes to these like young people.
A lot of things that
that
is really, or one thing that I find very unhelpful with it is the spread of misinformation around the topic, because there's a lot of particularly like YouTubers and very like I guess you'd say like
Twitch streamers.
Twitch streamers.
Twitch streamers.
Twitch is a generally progressive space, but I mean, there's pockets of people everywhere, but there's a lot of people, and like Shapiro comes to mind, who spout these quite old statistics on the data, and they'll be like, well, these people, doesn't matter if they're pre-op, post-op, whatever, the stats don't change, and they've got some serious mental health issues, and people don't take their lives because people are telling them they're bullying them or whatever. And all that stuff is like, well, I think it's completely untrue, and it's also really unhelpful. And all of the new studies that we can see have shown like pretty causal links between people not feeling accepted in society or by their families and peer groups, and how that's led to some serious mental health issues and spirals into things like them taking their life.
Yeah. And it's definitely something to be said that it's not like, I don't think it's that they I think people look at it like, oh, still they associate being trans or being part of the LGBTQI community.
I think you can
What's
just say
that?
LGBT. That's
LGBT
acceptable.
community as being like some sort of like subset of mental illness, and being like, okay, these people are struggling with their identity, and that like that's that's like, people equate that to a mental illness, when actually that's like fine. That's normal to It's normal to try to figure out who you are and what you like and what you want to do and who you want to be with your life. That's actually completely normal. What's not normal is when people are bullied for doing that, and uh, sequestered from society, and shoved to the side and downtrodden, and whereas like, and I hear it all the time where people, oh, like they're suffering from something, or like that's the illness, that's the illness there, not the fact that they've been bullied and stuff like that. You see it all the time, which is just really sad.
Yeah.
And discussing it, and I mean, half of these things is like they're social issues, and the best way to combat them is by raising awareness and foreground. So
it's one
thanks for
issue
bringing it
that
up.
I'm very sad to think about, because there's so much adversity to it, at least in my circles, and also in the circles that I guess I see in online and that kind of thing. It's just like maybe people don't understand, or feel like because they are never going to be in that position, it's okay to throw them to the side and kind of and go with the generalized population with or something like that. But yeah, it makes me sad, because it's like getting better, but it doesn't seem. I'm not happy with the way that things seem to be improving.
Yeah, like it needs. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like there needs to be improvement way faster than what we're seeing. Any thoughts on like what like how to combat it, Zach? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I think we can get a lot better at supporting either friends or if you're like, for instance, for Fresh working with young people, or just in your groups, just being better at asking questions, and like genuine questions, um, taking interest, and uh, one way that and one approach that I've found very liberating, not only for like working with young people who might be LGBTQI plus, but also just people in general, is just a um, adopting an attitude of how can I be the most useful and most helpful to my friends. And it seems very simple, but when you start adopting an attitude of how can I be useful and how can I be helpful, um, you approach a way of life that is very selfless, and I really I've really valued that attitude when I've kind of applied that to situations. The hardest part, though, is that it's kind of like a choice in every conversation. Is all right, how am I going to be useful, or how am I going to be helpful?
Yeah.
And a lot of times we have friends that will be listening,
Yep.
and I think we're shit at that. I don't think we're great. We're not great listeners. And
I think listening takes time, and people are learning to value time. It's becoming more of a thing where it's like to value the time that you have, and I think that takes a lot of time, and people are like more unwilling to spend that time on just sitting there listening to somebody. Whereas like, and the people that I've come across with mental health issues, quite often that's just what they want. What they want is what they need is time, and just someone to like listen.
Yeah.
And it's like the easiest and simplest thing for us to give. It doesn't cost money. It doesn't, like, there's no barrier to giving it, other than just how much do you care and how much do you want to help.
Yeah, for sure. I also think the even like it's going to be a long road, because even when we were younger, I know that I don't feel like my group ever threw out the F slur often, but even just negatively connotating things towards gay was done so often, like anything negative, and you'd throw that out there.
100%.
And
growing up.
and that was something that I had to work on changing, like coming out of high school, and I guess without being like, I don't know, it sounds arrogant, but I'm the kind of person who would want to change that for other people, but plenty of people wouldn't really care that much. So even people who are under the age of 30 years, it's still a problem where they've got that harmful language, I guess you'd say, and that totally doesn't help.
Yeah. That's something that's like growing up. It's so hard because like quite often when you try to like stamp out something like that, or like it doesn't work. It like increases it when you're talking about like kids and high schoolers and stuff like that. It's weird how it works. It's like almost creates like a desire to do it more, or like rebellion against like authority to be doing it, and it's really weird.
It is a
like,
weird psychological thing. It's like the N-word on Twitch. Like that's what trolls do. They come in and just say the N-word for no reason other than it's like taboo. So dumb.
Exactly. Yeah, and like they're not racist.
No.
They're just saying that for reaction and for the reaction, and for like because people have said don't do it. You know, and it's such a weird one to try to like stamp it out. But I think making those words taboo socially and stuff like that is the right way to go about it, because you still will have those people that do it for like not inflammation, that's the wrong word, but like to be like to get attention, you know what I mean? And but better that there's a few people doing it to get attention and they're like held to account for it, rather than it's just a normal part of the culture, and like everybody does it just without thinking, which is what it was when I was growing up, you know, like saying that's gay was just normal. Everybody did it, and it just became a part of my vocabulary, and I had to work to change it.
That's interesting though, because we've had discussions about censoring speech before, and you've been very opposed to that.
Look, I still am not for censoring speech. I don't think that those people should be. I don't think that we can say that they can't say those words. Like we can't stop them from saying those words, but we can hold them socially to account.
Yeah.
And call them out for their bullshit. I definitely don't think that's the thing, but better that I think that it's still, this is getting into another topic, but I'm it's okay. I'm morally consistent, mate.
Well, let me just say that maybe holding them socially account might be banning them on platforms where they do that.
I disagree.
All right, we'll talk about that later. another podcast.
It's another topic,
It is interesting though, because a lot of people talk about, and obviously we're not in America, so we don't have a freedom of speech at all. What we do have though is we have the UN Convention of Human Rights, and under that, I think it's Article 2, I can't be sure, is freedom from discrimination. And that applies to race and sex and religion and stuff.
Everything.
But we also have, and I'm trying to remember which article it is as well. But it's the right to it's the freedom of expression. It's another one as well, and those are the kind of two big ones that we talk about. But you also have a right that means that you don't impede on other people's rights. So you can't come under the banner of freedom of speech and not come under the right to like a fair world and a free world. And you can't alienate one article, so one human right. You can't alienate it and have it exist in isolation to the other ones.
They all have to work together.
Correct. So when you say like an N slur or an F slur, for instance, you are exercising your freedom to express yourself, but you're also impeding on a bunch of other rights,
Interesting.
which makes the other one void. So fuck
Mm.
you.
Well, I find it a really interesting paradox of like tolerance. So we have this thing where we like to tolerate people. We know that that's a positive thing to tolerate
Yep.
different views and opposing views and everything. But it's also when you have someone who has intolerable views and views that spout intolerance and also would be, I guess, causing demonstrable harm to people, then it's almost like, do we tolerate that intolerant view? It's an interesting paradox.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my whole take on it, and I've said this thousands of times before, is I'd much prefer the people that are going to do that to be out in the open rather than put them away somewhere where, or like sequester them from society where it's like they can like become like their own little echo chamber, and potentially more harm can come from than if they get called out on their bullshit in a public forum.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But if they're in the open, they're also influencing the dumbasses who love that rhetoric.
I always find like rapport or like just a good chat is always a pretty good way of talking through things, like conversation.
Mm.
A lot of young people, because I've been a youth worker for 10 years now.
Mm.
Wow, I've never thought about it like that before.
You're old.
Shit.
We old.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, like in that period of time, like the F slurs kind of definitely gone out of fashion. And you have young people that would be like, "Oh, you're like, are you gay?" Or uh, trying to get a rise out of me with things that they think are controversial. And a lot of the times you'll reply with something that they're not expecting. Like you'll say, if they say like, "Oh, are you gay?" or whatever else. That's just the example I use. But I was given the question like, "Would you think about me differently if I said that I was?" And a lot of the times they'll say, "Oh no, that's fine. Like I don't really have an issue with that. I'm just doing it to like get a rise out of you." And it usually ends in like a quite good conversation, and then you talk about it, and then they don't really ask that question again.
No.
And maybe it's because they get a lecture and they didn't want the lecture,
Yeah.
or like they weren't expecting to be vulnerable in the conversation. Maybe.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, that's pretty much how I address it as well. It happened to me actually just last week, as someone at work was like, oh, okay, like, what are you, gay, kind of thing, or something like that, and I was like, is that a bad thing? You know, and like, and I just left it sitting there. You know, like I didn't feel any need to clarify whether or not I was homosexual or not, or what my orientation is. I just like kind of like left it sitting there and just like looked at them like, yeah, and you know, like, is that a bad thing? Like what are you gonna do? You know, like, oh, is this one of those? Let them like sit in that, like, oh, is this one of those situations where I've called a homosexual man gay, and I'm really uncomfortable, and I don't like the situation, and hopefully next time they go to say that to someone, they'll remember that feeling. You know.
yeah. Or even like, if only it was that
I like that.
simple.
Well, yeah, I know, and sometimes the problems go deeper and whatever. But I feel like for quite a lot of people, where it's just like the norm, or it's something that they just grew up with, and they don't really think about it as necessarily like
Yeah.
homophobic slurs, or even necessarily racial slurs. It could just be that that's what they're used to doing, and when they finally see some negative consequences for it, or like something happens that makes them go, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that, they just stop, you know, like straight away. And like, that's not for everybody, and once again, not a one size fits all solution, but you know, I find that just starting a conversation or talking about it or whatever definitely helps the most.
Yeah.
We're kind of up to 2 hours, Woke.
Yeah, should we get into some questions if there are any?
Well, we don't have any questions in the Discord, so that's cool.
All right.
We had a lot of chat questions, but it was hard to keep up and go through.
Hard to keep up with chat. It moves so fast. Do we want to talk about one more thing? I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about how to, or like, anxiety in relationships, which I've experienced a couple of times, and or not necessarily just anxiety, but like mental health issues when it comes to someone that you're you're married to, or you're dating or whatever. Because I
Yeah.
really struggled, really struggled with how it completely changes a person, like how they become so vastly different, and how when you're in a relationship, quite often you're there because you really care and you like that person, and when they become someone completely different, how hard it is to deal with that and how hard it is to cope with that. Have
Yeah.
you guys ever experienced anything like that?
Yeah, I've dated a few people who have had various issues, and I relate to you on some levels, because sometimes it'll come for them in sort of waves, right? So some days they'll be completely fine and everything will be like it is normally,
Mm,
and then the next day you'll go out to get lunch and they'll be like, I don't know what I want. I can't order for myself. Like, I can't talk to anyone right now. And it just sort of switches on all of a sudden. And it's being
mm,
able to deal with that and then try and, like, you feel like you need to try and make them comfortable. And you're like, do you just want to go? And they're like, no, I don't want to go. And it's really hard to deal with. Um, I don't know. I don't know the right way to deal with it. I try my best and I try and make them feel as comfortable as possible and all that kind of thing. But
mm.
it's definitely tricky. And it is complicated. And I think maybe there needs to be some kind of like awareness and a way to sort of teach people how to assist someone like that,
Yeah.
because like I don't have any education in it at all. I don't know what
No,
I'm doing.
100%. And I 100% found myself in the same boat where I don't know how to help, and it's kind of like quite often when people are experiencing those crises, they're very resistant to, or resistant to help almost, when they're like in the worst of the worst of it kind of thing. And
Yeah,
when you're dating someone, you're in a place where you care so much for that person that you sacrifice you almost get to this point where you sacrifice your life and your mental well-being for this person that you really care about. And that was something that coming to terms with that was like really difficult for me. And I'm sure that there are so many people out there that struggle with it.
Mm.
I,
yeah,
I still don't have the answers, but I um, just go through what I go with anybody that's like that approaches me that is struggling with mental health issues. I try to encourage them to seek help. I listen. I do the best that I can to listen, and I care for them on some level. But I've definitely got to this place where I don't. There's a line that I don't cross. I don't cross a line where it's like I sacrifice my own mental health and my own life,
Mm.
which is really it's really difficult to like find that balance.
Mm.
it's
Um,
super important to try and find it though,
Mm.
because
no, yeah,
if you go down the
100%
other route, then the whole relationship ends up
falling apart.
unintentionally becoming quite toxic as well. I think
Mm.
well,
Yeah,
in my experience anyway, whereas you
no,
try and
yeah,
do everything to satisfy the person who is in need, and then
mm,
it all kind of falls apart.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's definitely my experience as well. Um,
I haven't
it's
ever
yeah, it's definitely a
dated
tricky
anyone who
situation.
had like serious mental health issues, but in just working with a lot of people who have quite poor mental health, I know it's very important for me to have my own like debriefs and outlets where I can get myself in a healthy place too, because
Mm,
and it's obviously for my personal benefit, but also how can I expect to help people if I'm really struggling?
yeah,
And I can imagine it'd be similar in a relationship. If you're really struggling with your own personal mental health, then you're not going to be a whole lot of help to someone else who's struggling too.
no, yeah.
yeah,
It's definitely one of those places where it's like you need to like take care of yourself before you take care of anyone else. And um, even as much as that sounds like a selfish way to put it, like if you're not in a good place,
Mm.
then you shouldn't be trying to
Not great for you. We should parallel it to physical health again, where when you're having to come to a scene and got to provide first aid to someone, you got to actually look after your own personal well-being first, because if you're also going to be hit by a car or whatever, that's a bit of a dumb example, but if your
yeah,
personal
no,
safety is in danger, then you're not going to be any help at all to anyone.
yeah. What's the thing,
yeah,
Doctor ABC?
Yeah, that's right. Danger is
Danger
first. Your
first,
own danger.
assess the danger to yourself and
Yeah.
others. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
You also run the risk of creating or dependency. But then
Mm.
even worse, you can, if you're both kind of struggling, that codependency,
Mm.
and that never ends well. If you want to know more about codependency, you can Google that one. But essentially, it's where you get to a point where you can't really function or live without each other, and it's not a place you want to exist.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can. I would definitely encourage people to learn about and to educate yourself on what your partner might have,
Mm.
Yeah.
and even the act of being intentional about looking can have a really positive effect. It's proven that even that willingness to learn has very positive outcomes for your partner.
Mm.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're going to be there for them as well, but then also helping them to create, if they want you to, of course, but creating goals or a self-care plan can be really valuable for them. And again, it just comes to that willingness to communicate, and creating that home environment that can be quite supportive,
Yeah.
and also extending, and this is the big one, but extending their support group to outside of just you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Um,
100%.
and that a lot of the times they'll feel like isolating themselves, and it would be just you, and
Mm.
that's a very very dangerous position to be in.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Good point.
Great points.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, unless anybody else has anything that they particularly want to talk about, I'm probably going to call it there.
I think we can review the beers.
Yeah, we can
Wrap it
review the
up.
beers. Just before we review the beer, I wanted to say that I mean, you touched on it just quickly there, Zach, and we've kind of mentioned it a couple of times, but educating yourself on these issues is like, man, it's like 9/10 of the rule. Like if you can be like, we're just trying to raise awareness through talking about it, but knowing a little bit more about it, it's all very helpful for stopping any kind of stigma and making people more willing to reach out, and also helping yourself to reach out as well, if you're struggling. So yeah, just look into it more. And yeah. All right. Beer review.
Yeah.
Beer review.
Yeah.
Beer review. I'm gonna go first.
Go.
I'm just gonna get straight into it. So Hollandia Premium Lager is what I was. A little bit of a for the, you can kind of sleuth it out, but my namesake in there. So to be honest, it was just a lager. It was just a normal lager. It tasted to me like Corona, or like I don't know, Great Northern, like any lager that I've had that is not like fancy. It's just like a normal everyday run of the mill lager. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad. It was just a lager. So, considering that I only paid $35 a whole carton, I would actually recommend it.
Yeah.
If you're just wanting like a Corona or something like that. But in terms of how it stacks up to other beers that I've drank, not great. And I mean, obviously personal preference in there as well, but I'm going to give it a 9 out of 20. Yeah. Fresh, do you want to go next?
Yeah. So the Four Pines Brewing Co. Draught Kolsch style ale was really good. I like Kolsch style ales generally.
Nice.
Four Pines is a little exy, I guess. Just they're not a cheap beer. And it was it was good, but it was a standard Kolsch. So like it wasn't an amazing Kolsch. It definitely wasn't a bad one. So I feel like I'm gonna give it maybe a 14 out of 20 for being a good standard Kolsch on the high end of expenses. Rebel.
Right, yeah. So I was drinking Viven, which is a Belgian smoked porter. Porter, of course, is a dark style of beer originally developed in London. If you haven't had porter before, it's somewhere between, I want to say it's like somewhere between like a stout or an ale, but then closer onto the lager side for me. So I'm not really a big ale drinker, so it's quite nice. It kind of tastes like I don't know if you've ever been to like a cookout or a barbecue with all your mates, and then it's 6 a.m. and the fire or the barbecue's gone out, and you're drinking that beer that's been it was open and kind of sat next to the barbecue all night. It
It's
tastes
smoky.
a bit like that. Yeah, it's smoky, but it's it tastes like that, but not gross. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
like it's nice and cold, and it's like fresh and quite nice. And also it's 7%, so I'm pretty happy.
Hey.
That'll do it.
I would genuinely probably give it like a 17 out of 20.
Wow.
It's really quite nice. Yeah.
Ah, sweet.
Yeah.
Man, that's a great score. Zach, how's your what was it again? Iced tea?
Yeah, Brookvale Union. So they had a vodka-based peach iced tea.
Oh.
It was nice. It had like that you know the iced tea aftertaste, so it kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
just
yeah.
drops off completely. So it's like
Yep.
it was really dark and fruity, and then just kind of disappeared, which is nice. And like I was imagining myself like on a beach somewhere drinking it.
Nice.
Maybe like
Nice.
I feel like it's like quite a uniting drink. Like I could be drinking it, and then like a bunch of 17-year-old girls could be drinking it, and then like a 45-year-old lady could be drinking it as well. So like
I thought you were going somewhere completely
Yeah,
different with
what?
that.
Yeah, I was like,
I was like, why 17? What is going on here? Nice. And what rating out of 20 would you give it?
out of 20, that's a lot of
It's a lot of
numbers.
numbers.
A lot of numbers.
About 60% of whatever that is.
So
14?
12.
I don't know. 12? Oh, okay. I'm not. My
Yeah,
maths.
Something
14,
like that.
13,
14?
13 and a
13.
half.
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
something like that.
13.6.
Nice, very nice. And sweet. All right, cool. Well, thank you to our guests for coming. Luke, Blackfire Rebel, where can we find you, mate?
You can Google me. I'm on Twitter, Twitch, but I'm also been making a pretty big push for YouTube lately. I've been uploading
Yeah,
weekly, so
boy.
if you want to just go into YouTube and type in Blackfire Rebel and give us a
Nice.
little subscribe over there. I talk about like feelings and emotions and stuff sometimes, and my thoughts on things. So if you're curious on more of that, please do. Thank you guys for having me. I super appreciate it. I really do.
that's
Sorry I wasn't super awake and active today. I had a pretty heavy night last night. I tried my best.
That's fair.
No,
It was
it
a.
was good.
But it was a
well
Twitch
dead.
special, wasn't it? Last night?
It was a Twitch special, yeah. I celebrated my 2-year anniversary on Twitch.
2-year
we had
anniversary
a
on
wild
Twitch.
time.
Years.
It's
Well
crazy.
done.
Me and Rebel met.
Congrats.
It's got to be like a year and a half ago now. On Twitch, and we used to do a podcast together pretty regularly. We've been really good Twitch friends for a very long time. So make sure you're following this man, especially the YouTubes now. Blackfire Rebel.
I was reminiscing last night. I was watching the first 5 minutes of our first podcast we ever did together, and there's this bit where I unmute. I say, "All right, guys, I'm ready. I'm gonna unmute." I unmute, and then you're like, "Oh my god, there's 16 people here!" And I was like, "Oh, imagine Fresh being excited for 16
Oh my
people
gosh,
when he
there's
pulls
16
like 40 on a
people.
normal stream now." I was like, "You just sound so excited." It's the first thing that's said in the whole
Oh.
podcast. It was so wholesome.
Back to the good old days. Wholesome.
Yeah.
And Zach, mate, thank you very much for coming on. Yeah, obviously you don't have social. I mean, you do have social medias, but like private ones.
Yeah, no public handle or anything like that. I will say though, like if anyone is interested in studying mental health or community services or youth work, you can get my details from Fresh or from work.
100%.
And if you are kind of in a space where you're not feeling that great, or if you feel like you're in crisis and need some support, you can go to Lifeline here in Australia. If you just want to hit the little help thing again, Fresh, that'd be great. And it looks like it might be a bit of a sad time because some people in chat are saying that Juice WRLD's just passed away, which is sad.
Yeah, I was just looking up. He had like a seizure on the Chicago's Midway Airport or something.
Yeah, 21 years old.
Wow.
Rough.
That is so young.
Man,
So
very rough.
if you are not coping too well, just make sure that you're reaching out to people. Beyond Blue also have an online chat between so a 24/7 telephone and an online chat 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. If you don't feel like calling, you can just do some like web chat kind of thing.
That's really good.
Bit more accessible.
Yeah, web chat's really good.
I think Kids Helpline does it as well for people under 25.
Yeah, so Kids Helpline, yeah, they also, and they're 1-800-55-1800, and they it says Kids Helpline, but it's anyone under 25. So hit up all those resources if you're struggling.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you everybody for and I hope you made you think about something that you haven't thought about before. And yep, Freshly Awoken podcast. I love
Freshly
that. I
Awoken
love that you've got the
podcast.
little mic there as well.
I know. What
And
a lad.
yeah,
What a
thanks
mad
for
lad.
tuning in.
I'm an
And
artist.
we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Farewell.